Time now for Perspective, and it's Monday, which means it's time to check in on how things are looking for the leading candidates ahead of the first round of the French presidential election on the 10th of April. I'm joined now by French history expert Andrew Smith from Chichester University in the UK, our regular guest throughout this election period. It's good to have you with us once again, Andrew, today. On Sunday, Jean-Luc Mélenchon of the France Unbowed party held a huge rally in central Paris to promise a legal retirement age of 60, while President Macron is pledging to raise the retirement age to 65 from the current age of 62. Just how important an issue is this for French voters?
Well, yes, I think it's certainly an important issue, this idea of retirement. Of course, this is something around pension reforms that Emmanuel Macron made the centre of his 2017 reform plans. Of course, we saw the furious reaction when, of course, those pension reforms, Emmanuel Macron tried to put them into effect earlier in the quinquennat. Now, this is important. Why? Because it represents a direct challenge, a direct alternative. And I think this is something that will be important for Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Of course, one of the big things at the moment is he's rising in the polls, looking like in the moment he sits in sort of third place in the opinion polls. Now, this is important. Why? Because, as you said, he did another big march, his usual march for the Sixth Republic, which he always kind of holds before these election rounds. He did it in 2012. He did it in 2017. It represents, again, this is his third tilt at the presidency, but it seems to be that this is the one in which he's getting the most traction. The collapse of the centre-left has put a lot of emphasis, I think, on Jean-Luc Mélenchon as the potential for, people call it a useful vote, looks set to be something which is influential. Now, that just means really that people look at the other options on offer, and they see in Macron someone who, more than ever before, I think, they see essentially as a centre-right candidate. And for anyone who is sort of last time round, rallied to Macron from the centre-left, they may look this time to say, well, how do we get a useful vote to give us an option in the second round? And that could well be the idea that sees some people go. And so I think, as you say, those ideas like the idea of retirement age, the understanding of how pension reforms work, these are important things because for ordinary people, the issue is purchasing power. That remains a really important issue, I think, for all French voters.
And let's talk for a minute about President Macron. It was only last week that we got our first real glimpse of his manifesto, just weeks ahead of the first round of voting. What, if anything, stood out for you in that manifesto?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And as we say, still no rallies. Well, technically no rallies. He's been to Poissy, now to Pau. And he's kind of really, as you said, kind of sketched out the details around what he wants to offer. Of course, he set out all of his key kind of pillars of his offer. Of course, he talks about the pact between generations and the idea of pushing for greater production for the Republic. And also for Europe as well. Now, that's something that actually people talked about in the last meeting. Emmanuel Macron put more emphasis on ideas of sovereignty in France, in particular on ideas of agricultural production, but also things that France wants to kind of retain control of. So there was some discussion about, potentially increasing the stake in national energy suppliers like EDF. Now, that doesn't mean anything crazy dramatic of a sort of nationalisation. Already France, the state, owns like something like 84%, so it would be buying back the rest they don't own. He also mentioned other things like, the idea of a scheme for renting electric cars for ordinary people. And that's part of this kind of green ecological transition, which he wants to be focused on as well, as a means to kind of increasing French sovereignty within the security of food and energy. Other things that he's mentioned, big new thing from Macron is this new pact with teachers. Now, we mentioned Mélenchon already. He's made a big point about how much more he wants to pay teachers. Emmanuel Macron is also offering a big pay rise, it looks like, to ordinary teachers. But also that comes with a catch, which is a lot more involvement in shaping the national curriculum, the national conversation around education. He said he wants to meet up with different people in order to help shape the Republic and strengthen those values. So there's a lot of interesting things emerging and seeing more and more in terms of, Macron coming into contact with people. There was a little bit more naturalness, we might say. It was a little bit more natural in terms of the discussions at Pau. Of course, there were kind of readers drawn in from newspapers, but still quite a tightly controlled operation and very glitzily filmed and all these kind of things as well. But we're starting to see the president open up to make that offer clear to the French people. And it really looks like this first round is, as you say, nearly upon us.
And Macron has, it should be said, been accused by many of his rivals of trying to bypass the usual cut and thrust of the election campaign. He does, of course, with Ukraine, have a huge amount on his plate at the moment. Is there any proof that French voters share that concern, that Macron maybe might not be engaging with this campaign as much as he should be?
It's a tough one because, as you say, with Ukraine in the background, it is an issue which the head of state does need to address. Of course, we've seen already that Macron has had a long and ongoing role in attempting to find diplomatic solutions. We hear constantly about his long calls to both Putin and Zelensky and trying to find some common cause that they can actually, find a settlement, as it were. Now, it's difficult because, of course, many of the other campaigns want to debate Macron. You look at somebody like Zemmour, his whole thing is debate and interview and the cut and thrust of all of that. So in a way, Macron is denying him that oxygen. And it looks like it is a deliberate tactic, but also one which he feels is, something that he can sustain at this moment. Now, we talked a lot about whether there should be a big debate between all the candidates. That really happened for the first time ever in the last presidential election. There was one substantive debate with 5 candidates and one absolute chaotic mess with all 11. We've got 12 this time round, so it might be even worse if we did that. Now, actually, I think there is some legitimacy to Macron making a positive offer, introducing his candidacy, and then setting out this platform. I think once it comes to the second round, we can probably assume that Macron will make the second round, and there we will see a lot of debates with the next candidate. But like you say, it's frustrating some of the other opponents. I think Eric Zemmour specifically is very frustrated by that. He's had a slightly downbeat meeting in Metz just at the weekend. Other people like Valérie Pécresse, whose campaign continues to flounder. Those ongoing rumours about whether or not former President Sarkozy would endorse Macron instead of her, and all these things that might just, see off the campaign in that sense. And likewise, somebody like Marine Le Pen as well, probably not unhappy about the fact that she's not going to be debating directly with Macron so far, given the way that went in 2017. So I think there's a lot of the other campaigns are maybe, slightly frustrated because they want to kind of land a blow on the president. But for him, he remains above the fray. Now, I think, as you say, in part that's a function of pragmatism, but it's also a function of, a tactic, like it's an electoral tactic. So far, I think the French people, it's probably a difficult one. He wants to be discreet. He doesn't want to become the figure, the target for all those opponents to unite against. So at the moment, I think for Macron, for his vision for the French people, if he can remain presidential, if he can remain high profile and be seen to be doing his job, then I think that probably gives him his best shot at getting into that second round and in kind of facing up against whoever comes to meet him there.
Andrew Smith, French history expert at Chichester University, thank you very much and looking forward to speaking to you again next Monday.
Thank you.